Right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar. My name is Katie Griffin. I am on our community education team here at Ent Credit Union, and I have been with Ent for about 7 years now, but I've been working in the industry for about the last 15 years. And a lot of that time was spent working in the branches, which was a really great experience, getting to help our members and learn all kinds of things. And now I'm on the education side of things. And so our team in community education, we get to go out in the community and teach financial wellness classes, a variety of topics, totally for free. So I just really appreciate everyone being here this morning for today's webinar, which I will go ahead and share my screen so that we can get started with that today. All right, so today's webinar is titled Wallet Wellness for Families. So we have a couple different topics that we will be covering throughout today's webinar. We're going to get into making a spending plan for the whole family. We're going to get into some savings and investments. And then lastly, wrap up with how to involve the kiddos in our finances and making them a part of the plan. But first, just want to talk about, what is wallet wellness for the family? What exactly does that mean? So when we say wallet wellness for the family, we're including everyone. So include everyone in the household and even the kids. We'll talk towards the end about how to involve kids in the family finances. But there's a lot of positive things that can come out of including the whole family in financial planning. When we do that, everyone knows the plan and is on the same page, which can really alleviate any stress about not knowing what is going on, can help reduce any miscommunication about goals and priorities, and just really gives each member of the household a sense of responsibility, which all these things contribute to strengthening relationships within the home. So a lot of good things that can come from including everyone in the family when we're talking about our finances. But as a family, so there's three things that you can be having conversations about. So we have creating a spending plan, building those savings habits, and looking at setting goals together. So when it comes to a spending plan, you're looking at what income is coming in, what expenses are going out. So if it's you plus a partner, then there are several strategies to either blending or not blending your income, which we go into in another one of our webinars that you can find on our YouTube channel. It's titled Financial Strategies for Couples. But for the expenses side, it helps to involve everyone to discuss what the various household expenses are. It can even be good for kids to be involved in these conversations to introduce an awareness to how much things are actually costing. And for savings and goal setting, you can absolutely have your individual goals, but it's helpful to include everyone to talk about joint goals and dreams. This can be looking more long term, like buying a house or paying for college, or maybe more short term, like saving up for a family vacation or an upcoming birthday party. This part can be a lot of fun to talk about as a family, have everyone involved and see what everyone wants to save up for and how you want to plan out that savings. And then all members of the house can encourage one another and hold each other accountable. But let's go into each of these areas a little bit more. So, when it comes to your spending plan, there's a lot of different budgeting strategies out there. And using a budgeting strategy to create a plan for your money it's helpful because having a plan will help you ensure things are taken care of and you're working towards your goals at the same time. The most important thing is that you find one that you like, that works for you, because you'll be more likely to stick with it in that case. And you don't have to pick just one of these. My personal budget is a mixture of several different strategies that I morphed into something that works for me and my family. But let's go through what each of these looks like. So the envelope method, with this one, the original way to do the envelope method was to actually have envelopes labeled your different spending categories. You might have one for like rent or mortgage, and one for food, one for clothing. And as income comes in each month, you would take out the cash, put how much cash in each envelope that you plan to spend that month in those categories. And then as that envelope empties out, the spending in that category is done for the month. Now, with things being much more digital today, another way that you can do the envelope method is to have multiple checking accounts set up underneath your account. And then you can label those different checkings, the different spending categories. You could have one for food, one for clothing, one for housing. And then as your direct deposit comes in, you can transfer your money out to the different checkings and checking accounts, and then you can spend your money that way. So some different ways to do that envelope method, but essentially it's just creating those little buckets for each of your spending categories. The zero sum method, with this one, we are allocating all of our income to something. So down to the penny. So whatever you have coming in, it's being split up into uh, just different categories, including savings as well. And so I don't know about y'all, but sometimes, before I really got into budgeting and planning, I would get paid and then I'd go around swiping my debit card because it's so easy to do. And I would, at some point in the month, realize that my account's empty and I have no idea where any of my money went. So the zero sum method helps prevent that situation from happening. So by allocating every penny of your income to a category, you know where your money is going and what you're spending your money on. The automatic budgeting strategy is just as it sounds. So it is just automating as much as you possibly can. So automatic transfers, bill pay, automatic payments, whatever that looks like, whatever you can set up to do automatically, and then that's just less that you have to think about. The reverse budgeting strategy is prioritizing savings and debt repayment. So with this one, we have our income and we're making sure our needs are met, so making sure those, like bills and important things are taken care of and paid. And then whatever is left after the needs are taken care of, then we're just first deciding how much are we putting towards our savings before we start spending money on like the wants and the fun stuff. So it's really putting a priority on that savings piece, also that debt repayment piece, more that pay yourself first mentality, but still having some, for the wants, right? Having that balance is important. But with the reverse budgeting strategy, it's focusing on the savings piece first before we get to the want side. And then the last budgeting strategy we have here is the percentile method. So with this one, we are taking our income and splitting it up into three simple categories. So we have our needs, our wants, and our savings. With a percentile method, the recommendation is that we have 50% going towards our needs, 30% towards our wants, and then 20% towards our savings. Now, those percentages are guidelines, right? They're not set in stone. So if your needs actually take up 60%, that's totally okay. Have 60% go towards your needs and then make adjustments in the other two categories. But with any of these budgeting strategies, you want to make sure that you are basing it on your take home pay. That's what is, you're actually going home with after taxes are taken out and stuff like that. And then last thing with that percentile budgeting method, I mentioned it has 20% going towards your savings. And sometimes that can feel like a lot, especially right at the beginning, or, if you're either just getting started or just reevaluating your budget, whatever, position you're in, 20% towards savings can feel a little overwhelming. So if that's the case, it's okay. Take a deep breath and just start putting something towards savings. So whether it's 5%, $5 a month, whatever that looks like for you, to start developing that habit of contributing to the savings. And then over time, you can increase it along the way, as you're able to. But with all these budgeting strategies, another thing that you can keep in mind when you're trying to decide which strategy to go with or how you want to organize your spending, how you want to set up your savings to work towards different goals, something that can help guide these thoughts and conversations is to keep your values in mind. So value-based spending is another type of budgeting. And in this situation, we're thinking about what are those things that are really most important to us. And it takes some time to reflect on that. If someone just walks up to you on the street and says, "Hey, what are your top five values?" It might take you a minute to really think about what are those top five things that are really most important to me. So take the time to reflect on that and think on it. And then once you determine what those most important things are to you, then you can look at your spending and see if your spending is supporting those values or if they're taking away from it. So you can look at your goals, what your different goals are, those things that you want to save up for. Is your spending supporting that, or or your spending habits maybe preventing you from reaching those goals? But you might see that it's a shift in your mindset as you consider your values alongside your spending and your savings. You might see you change your mindset, might see you approach different purchases like in a different light, or think about things slightly differently. So something that can just help, like I said, guide those thoughts and conversations when you're uh, setting up your spending and savings plan and deciding on those different budgeting strategies. But speaking of savings, well, actually, before we get into more savings, so sometimes life events happen, right? Life events come up, especially like in a family situation. There's a lot of different people involved, and uh, you never know, like what the next event might be for each family member. So, some steps that you can take to just help prepare, help navigate through whatever that life event is that comes up. There's some things that we can do. So first, just to look ahead. So look out into the future and see if you know what that next life event might be. Might be a graduation, or a vacation, or purchasing a house, or a wedding, or whatever it might be. Looking ahead to what that next life event might be, and then prioritizing. So that's going to look at, looking at your budget. How are you prioritizing your spending and your savings, prioritizing different things that need to get done in preparation for that life event coming up, and then doing your research. So looking, there's just so many resources, especially like with the internet now, a lot of different resources, places to research, reaching out to different people, just doing your homework, essentially, finding deals, rather than just going with like the first thing that you find, doing your research and having options that you can sort through and determine which is the best option for you and your family. And of course, savings is a piece of that. So save, save, save. If you know exactly when this event is going to happen, like let's say it's a year from now, and you have to save up X amount of dollars to be able to, do this event, however much you need to save, divide that by those 12 months between now and then, and that'll give you an idea of how much each month that you'll be saving, or want to try to save, so that you can be prepared for that event. And as I mentioned, just knowing your resources. There's a lot of resources out there available, folks that want to help. And so again, just doing your homework and your research and knowing what those resources are, whether they're different organizations or nonprofits or family, your friends, whoever it might be, tap into those resources. That's why they're there. They're here to help you out. But when it comes to savings, so that savings piece, we've mentioned that a couple times as part of our budget, as part of preparing for life events. There are different types of savings out there that we want to look into. So the first savings type is periodic savings. So this is saving for those occasional expenses that we know like are going to come up. eventually. We just might not know when exactly, but sometimes we do know when they're going to happen. So maybe an annual subscription, like every year on this date, this subscription is going to come out. And so saving up throughout the year so that you have the money ready available to be able to pay for that thing. That could be something like getting your tires, so getting new tires, that's not a cheap thing to do, but if you are driving a vehicle, you know that at some point you are going to have to get new tires throughout the life of that vehicle. So setting money aside along the way to prepare for that situation coming up. Could also look like if like a field trip, like if your kids have a field trip like coming up, some kind of school trip that we need to save up for, then that could be a periodic expense also. We also have our emergency savings. So this is for those life happens events. So sometimes life happens and life doesn't always like to tell us when it's going to happen. So having a separate savings set aside for those emergencies is going to help alleviate some stress when those emergency situations potentially do happen. They might not happen, hopefully they don't, but if they do, we want to try to be as prepared for them as possible. So when it comes to emergency savings, first step is just deciding how much you want to put towards that every month. And with all these savings, it's when you're deciding how much is going towards your savings each month. Like, for example, with that percentile budgeting method, we said 20% towards savings. So we're deciding that 20% towards savings, how much is going into each of these different types of savings buckets. So deciding how much am I putting towards periodic, how much am I putting towards my emergency savings. And so first step with building emergency savings is deciding how much is going towards it. And then also deciding how much do you want your emergency savings to grow. So the typical recommendation is that our emergency savings holds 3 to 6 months worth of our expenses. And that can be a really big number. I know the first time I calculated that for myself, I was blown away. And it was a little discouraging, honestly, because it was such a big number. So while that's a good end goal to have, we recommend starting with smaller goals that are a little easier to digest, a little easier to work towards. So you can start with a goal of $1,000. So a lot of folks don't have $1,000 saved up for an emergency situation. So starting with that as an initial goal is a great place to get started. And then once you have that 1,000 saved up, then you can, move on to, okay, my next goal is to have 2,000 saved up, and just work your way up like that and celebrate those milestones. When you reach those mini goals along the way to your bigger goal, celebrate it because it's a big deal to be able to do that. Another way you can look at it is saving, like building your emergency savings based on your different spending categories. So maybe you start out with saving, what 1 month of rent or mortgages, or what 1 month of food looks like. And then once you have that set up in your emergency savings, and okay, what does 2 months of food look like? And you can build it out that way as well. But also just knowing like what you would want to spend your emergency savings on. So that's going to be different for all of us. Think about what those emergency situations look like to you. And then you can make those decisions on when you might need to spend that. The last type of savings is our long-term savings. And so this might be looking at, like a house down payment, or saving up for a big family vacation, maybe saving up for college, for, if there's a child in the family that wants to do that. So looking more long-term. And so, as I mentioned, like with each of these types of savings, they each serve a different purpose, and part of making your budgeting plan, your saving and spending plan, is deciding how much you want going into each of these different categories. All right, so another option that we have, first we recommend building up that emergency savings sum. And then another option that you can look into is investing. So, depending on what your family goals are, will determine what type of investing that you may want to explore. So for a goal that is coming up a little bit sooner than later, a short-term mutual fund is an option, but you can also look into like finding a savings or a money market account that has a decent interest rate, or exploring CDs. So a CD is a certificate of deposit, and that is a more of a like a short-term like situation that locks your money. So let's say you have like a 6-month CD. That means for 6 months for 6 months, your funds will be in that CD. So you can access it if you need to, but there may be a penalty to do an early withdrawal. But the idea is to leave the funds in that CD for whatever that term is, whether it's 6 months, 9 months, a year, they go even longer than that. But these CDs will have typically will have a higher interest rate than a regular savings or money market account. So if you're able to put some funds aside for a certain amount of time, looking kind of within that 2-year time frame, then a CD can be a good option, because you'll have that higher rate of return than a regular savings account. So for other types of goals, you have options when it comes to what type of investments you explore. But goals and time go hand in hand and will impact the type of investments that you may feel comfortable exploring. So while the shorter time span leaves little room for volatility, a longer term goal may be able to ride out those ups and downs of the market, with a less conservative investment. But just be sure to assess like your own personal risk tolerance and think about what you're comfortable with. And then we also recommend talking with someone like our investment services team to just kind of navigate these conversations and help you decide what might look best, for you and your family. But whatever the case may be, the sooner you start saving, the better, because of the power of compound interest. So compound interest is this beautiful, magical thing that allows our savings to really grow exponentially. So in this example here, let's say if you deposit $1,000 a year, in 30 years, you would have $30,000. But if you put that $1,000 a year in something that has interest, like for example, if something that has like a 5% APY in this example, then after those 30 years, you would have over $66,000. So more than double what you would have if you had just been putting 1,000 aside, without any kind of interest component. So when it comes to compound interest, of course, the sooner you start, the better. But know that it's never too late to get started. So just it's just really neat to see like your savings, increasing exponentially. And like I said, like that's why the sooner the better. But it's never too late to get started. All right, so let's go into talking more about getting those younger members of the family involved. So, as mentioned earlier, involving them in your budgeting and savings plan can really help bring a sense of responsibility and awareness, and they'll feel like they're contributing to things in the family. With school just right around the corner, having them help plan their school supply shopping budget is a great place to start. You can get their input and help guide the conversation. Or, if there's a toy that they really want or something that they really want to do, that's a great time to encourage that savings piece. Or if they get an allowance, you can help them set up their own budget for their allowance, putting some towards a savings goal that they might have, and then having some like to buy a toy or do something fun. But in your conversations, try some different like phrases that you can try are like rather than saying like we can't afford that right now, maybe try we don't have that in the budget, we're saving for this goal instead. It's kind of rewriting that narrative a little bit, or if they are like wanting to go out to the movies with their friends, you can say, okay, if you go to the movies tonight, will that leave you with enough spending money for the weekend? Get them to really kind of think about that future. And, like if they do this action now, how is that going to impact future actions that they might want to do? But here's an example of some different expenses and savings categories that can be used to help get kids involved. Planning for a friend's birthday, getting ready for school coming up with clothes, supplies, lunches, things like that. Saving up for a different goal. You might be surprised like how much they like really get into it all and just really feel like they're helping out. And just as a reminder that you can open up youth accounts, which can really help the kiddos get organized with their money. So if you have some of the younger ones, like up to age 14, so the youth doesn't have to be present, but you do have to have their social security number. So very, very important. Be sure you have that with you. 15 and older, we do still need social security number, but we do prefer that the youth is present for 15 and older. So at that age, you can really help kind of explain like the whole process, and they can be more involved in it, understand, how that debit card works and things like that. But for the adults coming in with those youth, just be sure you have those two valid IDs with you. If you're a guardian, you bring proof of guardianship, and then just some other documents that you might want to have on hand just to help with that process. But definitely encourage getting the kids set up with accounts. Like I said, that can really help with just like getting organized and having like a savings to work towards different goals, and things like that. Also, just want to remind y'all that we do have free financial coaching available. So our financial coaches can either meet in person or virtually, whatever your preference is. But they can sit down, help with that budgeting plan, help working towards those different savings goals you have. It can also help with different things related to credit or debt repayment, but it can be really helpful having that third person, or just like whoever that outside person helping with our situation. Sometimes having someone that's not directly involved with what we're dealing with, can bring a different fresh perspective and help us think through things, and can just help us get our plan together so we can work towards those different goals that we have. But that brings us to the end of our webinar for today. So I appreciate y'all so much for joining, and stay tuned for our next webinars. If you go to ent.com/events, you can see our other webinars that we have coming up. And each month we'll offer a different topic. So be sure to check those out. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. And we will see you next time. Right. Thanks so much.